Hey everyone, welcome back. Ready to dive into something pretty interesting today.
Always excited to dive into a new topic.
Okay, so today we are going to be talking about diplomacy.
The game that ruins friendships. That's
Exactly.
right.
That's what they say, right? That's what everyone says.
That's what they say.
So we're going to be looking at an article today. It's called The Board Game of the Alpha Nerds.
Okay.
It's written by David Hill, published back in 2014. And basically what this article does is it follows David Hill's journey going to his first World DipCon
Wow.
tournament, and it was at DixieCon.
Okay.
So he kind of chronicles that whole experience.
That's fascinating.
And it's a wild ride, let me tell you.
So for folks who maybe haven't encountered this friendship-ruining game, can you give us a quick rundown of what diplomacy is and what makes it so unique?
Yeah, so Diplomacy is a board game
Uh-huh.
that simulates pre-World War I Europe.
Okay.
And basically, you're playing as one of the major powers you're trying to take over Europe.
Okay, got it. So the historical setting plays a role.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
You know, Europe in 1914 was this powder keg, right? All these different powers
Right.
vying for control.
Mm.
You've got all these alliances and treaties, and, things are very, very tense.
And that tension, I imagine, gets reflected in the game.
Exactly.
Okay.
And one of the things that makes diplomacy really unique
Yeah.
is that there's no element of luck.
Oh, interesting.
So there's no dice rolling, there's no card drawing.
Hmm.
It's all about negotiation.
So you're saying every move hinges on your ability to persuade and maybe even outsmart your fellow players.
Pretty much, yeah.
Wow, that sounds intense.
So each turn,
Yeah.
you write down your moves.
Okay.
But here's the thing. Everyone does it at the same time.
At the same time.
So you don't know what the other person's going to do.
So there's that element of surprise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the real action
Yeah.
happens before the moves are written down.
Interesting. So what happens before?
So there's this whole phase called negotiation
Gotcha.
where players can basically talk to each other,
Okay.
make deals,
Right.
form alliances,
Yeah. I see where this is going.
try to convince each other to do what they want.
And I'm guessing not all those deals are honored.
Let's just say that's where the ruined friendships part comes in.
Uh-huh. Right back to that.
Right. In the article, it starts off, we're thrown right into the action.
Yeah.
It's a late night at DixieCon.
Okay.
The author, David Hill, is playing in this, big tournament,
Uh-huh.
and he's feeling like completely betrayed
Oh, no.
by one of his allies.
Really?
Yeah, there's accusations flying left and right.
Wow. Sounds dramatic.
It is. It is.
So I guess what makes diplomacy so compelling is that it's not just about moving pieces on a board.
Yeah.
It's about navigating those complex human relationships.
Yeah. And figuring out, who you can trust.
Right.
Because trust is key.
Exactly. And when you have a game
Yeah.
where, your every move could potentially lead to your downfall, you have to be very careful who
Absolutely.
you trust. So it's almost like the game is holding up a mirror to our own human nature, right?
I think so.
Yeah. How we react under pressure, how we build trust, and how easily that trust can shatter.
Yeah. And how we deal with, betrayal and backstabbing.
It's fascinating, isn't it? This idea that a game can evoke such strong emotions.
Absolutely. So let's talk about some of the personalities
Okay.
that we meet in this article.
Okay.
In that late night showdown, we have Chris Martin.
Okay.
Now, Chris Martin is a former world champion.
Wow. So he knows what he's doing.
Yeah, he's like the master manipulator.
Oh, boy.
And then you've got Toby Harris and Andy Bartolone, who's nicknamed Buffalo.
Buffalo.
Yeah.
Okay.
And those two are quite ambitious, to say the least.
I bet.
And there's this whole standoff between them.
Uh-huh.
It's really interesting. But before we get to that,
Yeah.
I want to go back a little bit and talk about how diplomacy even came to be.
Yeah. How did this game even become a thing? It
Yeah.
seems like a recipe for disaster.
Right.
With all the potential for conflict and hurt feelings.
So it was actually created in the 1950s
Okay.
by a Harvard law student.
Interesting. A law student.
Yeah. His name was Alan B. Calhammer.
Okay.
And believe it or not, he actually struggled to sell the game.
Really?
Yeah, he shopped it around to different game companies,
Huh.
and they just weren't interested.
Huh. Why not? It seems like a pretty intriguing concept.
You would think, right.
Yeah.
But I guess it was just too unconventional for the time.
So too much backstabbing for the mainstream game companies.
Maybe.
Interesting.
But luckily for us, diplomacy didn't die there.
Oh, good.
It actually found its audience
Okay.
with a pretty unlikely group,
Ooh.
science fiction fans.
Really? Science fiction fans.
Yep.
I wouldn't have guessed that.
And they started playing it through postal mail.
Through a postal mail. Wow, that's dedication.
Talk about a slow burn, right?
Yeah, a year-long game of betrayal unfolding through letters.
It's incredible.
So how did it go from postal mail to the big time?
Well, these science fiction fans,
Yeah.
they were super passionate about the game.
Really?
And they started creating these like zines dedicated to it.
Zines, like little magazines.
Yeah, exactly. They would share strategies. They would analyze matches.
Wow.
They even started organizing tournaments.
So it was really this grassroots movement that kept diplomacy alive.
Yeah, exactly.
Hmm.
And eventually all that passion and dedication caught the eye of a major game publisher, Avalon Hill.
Avalon Hill.
Yeah. And they picked up the game in the 1970s.
Okay.
And that's when it really started to take off.
So it went from these niche zines to mainstream publication.
Yep. And from there, it spread to the UK.
Wow. So it went global.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And that brings us back to DixieCon.
Right back to DixieCon and the World DipCon.
Yes.
So what was the scene like at this tournament?
So the article describes it as, you've got all these players from all walks of life.
Okay.
Seasoned veterans,
Uh-huh.
wide-eyed newbies,
Right.
you name it. And one thing that the author points out is that, there's this stereotype of the shy, reclusive gamer.
Right.
But he's saying that diplomacy players, they're actually quite alpha.
Alpha. Interesting.
Yeah, like they're drawn to the game's intellectual and social challenges.
So it's not just about sitting in a dark room staring at a screen.
No, not at all. There's a lot of social interaction.
I guess you'd have to be pretty comfortable talking and negotiating to excel at this game.
Oh, absolutely. And there's this quote from one of the players, Siohan Nolan.
Okay.
She's a history grad student.
Uh-huh.
And she says that diplomacy players are the more social breed of gamer.
Huh. So maybe this game about betrayal actually attracts social butterflies.
Right. It's kind of counterintuitive, but it makes sense when you think about it.
You need charisma. You need to be able to read people, persuade them.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got alpha nerds and social butterflies all converging on DixieCon for this epic tournament.
Yep. And speaking of larger-than-life personalities,
Yes.
we have to talk about Edie Bersan.
Edie Bersan.
He is like a legend in the diplomacy world.
Okay, what makes him so legendary?
Well, he's been playing since the 1960s.
Wow, so he's seen it all.
Yeah. He's even played with the game's creator, Alan B. Kalhammer,
No way.
and won.
Seriously, he beat the creator of the game.
That's some serious street cred, right?
For sure.
But what's really interesting about Bersan is that he's a huge advocate for face-to-face play.
Even in today's digital age.
Oh, yeah. He's old school all the way. And the article tells this funny story
Oh, I love a good story.
about how he completely shocked a younger player
What happened?
by trying to call him on the phone
On the phone?
during a game
Seriously?
to discuss strategy.
Wow, that's hilarious.
Right.
I guess the younger player was probably expecting a text message or something.
Yeah, like a DM or
Go
something.
to phone call? That's so old school.
And the younger player was apparently completely baffled by it.
That's amazing. It really shows how the internet has changed the way we communicate.
Even in a game that's all about, personal interactions and negotiation.
Yeah, it's like those unspoken rules of communication have shifted.
Totally.
So we've got this generational clash brewing in the world of diplomacy.
Yeah, and it makes you wonder, right? Has the internet made diplomacy less intense?
Less personal?
Yeah.
That's a really good question.
All right, so we've got these larger-than-life personalities, this clash of generations.
Right.
And we're about to get back to that late-night negotiation at DixieCon,
Okay, let's get back to the action.
where the tension is just building and building.
So tell me what happens next.
Well, you'll have to wait for part 2 to find out.
All right, you got me on the edge of my seat.
Don't worry, we'll be back soon to unravel the rest of this story of alliances and betrayals.
Can't wait.
See you then. All right, so we're back.
Back in the thick of it.
Back in the thick of it at DixieCon.
Late night negotiations are underway.
Yes, and, before we find out what happens
Yeah.
with this, standoff between Chris Martin and Toby Harris and Buffalo Bartolone,
Right.
I kind of want to take a step back and think about, like, the ethics of diplomacy.
Oh, the ethics.
Right, because this is a game about deception
Yeah.
and betrayal.
It encourages it, really.
Right, and so I'm curious, like, how do you grapple with that?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I mean, the game mechanics themselves incentivize players to lie,
Right.
to break promises, to manipulate each other. It's like built into the DNA of the game.
And it makes you wonder, right? Like, how far is too far?
Yeah, where do you draw the line between game strategy and real life ethics?
Right, because, I mean, you're sitting across the table
Mm,
from your friends,
sometimes.
right? And you're looking them in the eye, and you're making a promise that you might not intend to keep.
Right. It's like you're betraying their trust on multiple levels.
Exactly. And it's interesting because the article talks about, different players having different approaches to this.
Okay.
Like Chris Martin,
Yeah.
he seems to really relish that role of the manipulator.
Like he's embracing the dark side.
Yeah, exactly.
Uh-huh.
But then you have other players
Yeah.
who, try to find a balance.
Like they're trying to play strategically,
Right.
but also maintain some level of integrity.
Yeah, and it's like, is there even such a thing as playing diplomacy ethically?
Right. Is it possible to win without resorting to some degree of deception?
And the article doesn't really give us a clear answer.
No, it just presents those different perspectives
Yeah.
and lets the reader kind of grapple with it themselves.
Yeah, it's like, what's your personal style? What are you comfortable with?
I think that's what makes it so fascinating from a psychological perspective.
Right.
It reveals so much about how we approach conflict and negotiation in general.
Yeah. Are you the type of person who's willing to win at all costs?
Right.
Or do you value honesty and integrity even if it means losing?
It's a tough choice, and diplomacy forces you to make it.
So have you ever played diplomacy?
I have actually,
Okay.
yeah, a few times.
And where do you fall on that spectrum?
I'm more of a play it straight kind of player. I like to think I can win through, clever strategy
Uh-huh.
and genuine negotiation.
Okay.
But I can definitely see the appeal of the more Machiavellian approach.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely more exciting.
It adds that element of unpredictability and, keeps everyone on their toes.
So it sounds like there's no right or wrong way to play.
I think that's the beauty of it.
Okay.
It accommodates all those different styles.
Okay, so enough about our philosophical musings on the nature of good and evil.
Right, let's get back to the game.
Let's get back to the action at DixieCon.
That late night negotiation session.
Okay, so remind us where we left off.
Okay, so we've got Chris Martin down to his last unit.
Okay.
Toby Harris and Buffalo Bartolone are teaming up,
Uh-huh.
trying to squeeze him out of the game.
And then Buffalo has that outburst.
Right. He gets frustrated,
Yes.
accuses Chris of manipulating the game.
So did that outburst change the course of the game?
Well, it definitely added fuel to the fire,
Yeah.
but in the end, Chris Martin held his ground. He had formed a strong alliance
Okay.
with Siohan Nolan
Okay.
and another player named Dan Stegeman.
Okay.
And together, they basically created this stalemate line.
A stalemate line.
Yeah, it's a defensive strategy
Yeah.
where you position your units in a way that blocks your opponents from advancing.
Got it.
So even though Harris and Bartolone had more units,
Yeah.
they couldn't break through.
So Chris Martin pulled it off.
He did.
Wow.
Even with just one unit left, he managed to outmaneuver his opponents.
That's incredible.
It's a classic example of how, in diplomacy, brute force isn't always enough.
Right.
You need to be strategic. You need to build strong alliances.
Okay.
And sometimes you need to know how to bluff your way to victory.
It's like that old saying, keep your friends close.
And your enemies closer.
Exactly.
You never know when an alliance might shift
Right.
or when a friend might turn into a foe.
Okay, so we've talked about Chris Martin,
Yeah.
but what about David Hill,
Oh, right. The author.
our author?
Yeah.
He's experiencing all this for the first time.
Right. This is his first World DipCon.
Yeah.
He's a rookie.
So how did he handle all this pressure?
Well, the article describes him feeling pretty overwhelmed. I mean, he's
Yeah.
caught in the middle of this high-stakes negotiation.
All right.
He's witnessing firsthand how cutthroat this game can be.
Yeah.
And he even gets into some shouting matches with other players.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he really gets a taste of the emotional roller coaster that is diplomacy.
So it sounds like a pretty intense experience.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
But despite all the stress and the drama, the article also hints at this growing fascination.
With the game.
Yeah, like he's getting hooked.
Almost like an addiction.
Yeah, it's that paradox of diplomacy.
What do you mean?
It pushes you to your limits, it tests your friendships, it can be emotionally draining,
Right.
but there's something about it that keeps people coming back for more.
So what is it about diplomacy that's so alluring?
I think it's that unique blend of intellectual challenge, social interaction, and psychological intrigue. It's like a mental workout, unlike any other.
Yeah, it's not just about strategy.
No.
It's about understanding people.
Yeah, reading them, anticipating their moves,
Okay.
figuring out how to manipulate them.
And in a world where so much of our communication is, through screens and social media, there's something really refreshing about the face-to-face intensity of diplomacy.
Right. It's raw. It's unfiltered.
Yeah, you can't hide behind a keyboard.
Exactly.
But that intensity also comes with risks,
Of course.
right? There's that potential for real-world emotional fallout.
Yeah, the stakes are higher when you're dealing with real people face to face.
So it sounds like diplomacy is not just a game.
No, it's more than that.
It's like an experiment in human nature.
I think so.
Okay, so we've talked about the intensity of face-to-face play.
Yeah,
But I want to circle back to Edie Bursan.
right. The advocate for the old ways.
Yeah, and his story about calling that younger player
Yeah, that was a classic.
really highlights how technology has changed the game.
Right? It's created this clash of cultures within the diplomacy community.
And it makes you wonder, right? Has the rise of online diplomacy sanitized the experience in some way?
That's a great question, and that's exactly what we'll be exploring in part 3 of our deep dive.
All right, so we're back for the final part
Part 3,
of our deep dive into diplomacy.
the game that just keeps on giving.
It does. It does.
So much to unpack.
There's so much. And, we ended part 2 talking about
Right.
Edie Bursan,
Yeah.
his kind of like, old school
Yeah.
approach to the game.
Yeah.
And it made us wonder, right?
Yeah.
Like, has the internet
Yeah.
changed the game
Change the experience.
in a fundamental way?
For sure. And, one thing that's undeniable is that online platforms have really broadened the reach of diplomacy.
Absolutely. I mean, think about it.
Yeah.
Back in the day, you had to find 6 other people
Right.
in your local area
Yeah.
who wanted to play this super intense game.
Right. It was probably tough to wrangle that many people
Oh, yeah.
regularly,
But now,
Yeah.
with online platforms,
Yeah.
you can play with anyone.
anywhere in the world.
Exactly.
That's amazing.
And the article even mentions that back in 2014,
Yeah.
online diplomacy was already starting to become more popular.
Then face-to-face games.
Yeah, so it's like this huge shift was already happening.
And I imagine that trend has only continued.
I'm sure.
So we've got tournaments, leagues, casual games all happening online constantly.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It's really opened up the game to a much wider audience.
But do you think
Yeah.
something's lost
Oh, that's the big question, isn't it?
in the transition online?
Right, because when you're negotiating through text or chat,
Yeah,
you miss out on all those subtle cues.
the body language.
Yeah, the facial expressions, the
Right.
tone of voice.
Right, it's just not the same.
It's like reading a transcript of a conversation versus actually being in the room.
Yeah, you lose that immediacy.
That rawness.
Right. And
Yeah.
thinking back to Edie Bursan,
Yeah,
I can't help but wonder
yeah.
what he would say
About all this.
about this shift online.
I bet he'd have some strong opinions.
I think he'd say that, something essential is lost.
Yeah, that the heart of diplomacy lies in those face-to-face interactions.
Right, in that shared experience.
That tension in the room.
And maybe he's right.
It's possible.
But I also wonder if,
Yeah.
the internet doesn't just, take away.
Right.
Maybe it also adds something,
Oh, interesting. Like what?
like new possibilities for strategy and deception.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
Like imagine being able to secretly message multiple players at once,
Oh, wow.
forging alliances and plotting betrayals.
That would be hard to pull off in person.
Right, you can't exactly pass notes under the table.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So maybe the internet actually amplifies the complexity of the game.
It adds a whole new layer of intrigue.
Exactly. And maybe that's why people are so drawn to it.
It's like a digital spy thriller unfolding.
Right. And you never know who's really on your side.
Okay, so maybe it's not about a loss of intensity,
Right.
but a shift in the nature of that intensity.
Yeah, like it's a different kind of intensity.
A more cerebral kind of intensity.
So we've got this, tension between tradition and innovation,
yeah.
between the raw personal experience
Right.
of face-to-face play
Mm-hmm.
and then the kind of like the strategic possibilities
Yeah.
of the online world.
It's a fascinating dynamic.
It really is. And it makes you wonder, like, what's next for diplomacy?
Right. Where does the game go from here?
Will online play completely take over?
Or will there always be a place for those classic face-to-face games?
And how will the game itself evolve?
Yeah. Will we see new rules, new mechanics?
Maybe even new technologies.
It's exciting to think about the possibilities.
So, we've spent all this time talking about
Yeah.
diplomacy.
This game that can ruin friendships.
Yeah. What do you think is the most important thing for our listeners to take away?
After all this, I think the key takeaway is that diplomacy is a microcosm of human nature.
Go
It's
ahead.
about our capacity for both cooperation and cunning,
Our brilliance.
and our tendency to sometimes, completely sabotage ourselves.
Right. It's like a crash course in
Ah.
psychology and strategy all rolled into one.
And whether you prefer the intensity of a face-to-face game
Yeah.
or the strategic depth of online play,
Diplomacy offers a truly unique experience.
it challenges you to think critically, to hone your negotiation skills, and to really understand the complexities of human relationships.
And at the end of the day, it's a game.
It is.
And it's meant to be fun,
Right.
but it's also a game that can teach us a lot.
About ourselves, about the world around us.
So would you recommend it?
I would,
Even with all the risks?
even with the potential for hurt feelings.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think it's an experience everyone should have at least once.
Okay, so there you have it.
Diplomacy,
The game that will test your friendships
your strategic skills.
and your sanity.
Heidi.
But hey, that's part of the fun, right?
Exactly. It's all part of the game.
So that's it for our deep dive into the world of diplomacy.
It's been a wild ride.
It has. We hope you enjoyed it.
And maybe learned a thing or two.
And who knows, maybe you'll even be inspired to give diplomacy a try yourself.
Just remember,
Yeah.
keep your wits about you.
And don't trust anyone.
Not even your closest allies.
Thanks for joining us.
Until next time.